Hello and welcome to a brand new season of the Climate Alarm Clock podcast. I'm Darragh and I'm here to introduce two special episodes. The first episode, which you're listening to right now, is a live episode that we recorded on stage at the Earth Rising Festival at the Irish Museum of Modern Art on the 14th of September. And the second episode that features a few interviews and chats with different contributors to the festival. You might recognize a few familiar voices if you're an avid listener of the Climate Alarm Clock podcast, and you'll hear a couple of new voices. And the idea of that second podcast, I suppose, is to give a flavour of what was going on at the Earth Rising Festival in IMMA over the weekend of the 12th, 13th and 14th of September. This episode you're going to listen today, as I mentioned, it's our first live episode ever, and it follows a pretty similar format to our usual podcast where we're doing a news roundup. It features myself, Ciara Daly, and Tom Spencer. Unfortunately, Anna wasn't around. In fact, she left Dublin City for the weekend when she heard we were all going to be up there. She was away and she was missed over the weekend. We did have a few hiccups and challenges pre-show. The weather meant that we had to move from an outdoor stage into the lobby of IMMA, and it was a little bit challenging in there. It was a bit echoey and people were moving in and out a lot, as happens in the lobby. And there were fewer places for people to sit and listen, so a lot of our audience were kind of standing around. But we persevered. We ended up having a really lovely chat with people stopping to listen to bits and pieces as the show went on. But as we started, it was looking pretty sparse out there, hence all the nervous jokes.
Hello, Glastonbury!
Hello everyone, you're very welcome to Earth Rising, and you're very, very welcome to a world first, the first ever live episode of the Climate Alarm Clock podcast. So thank you so much for coming. There's one free seat. We're nearly totally at capacity.
Please stop pushing at the back.
There's one free seat over there if anyone would like to sit down and get the last seat. So thanks so much for coming to Earth Rising and for coming to this live recording of the Climate Alarm Clock podcast. I suppose before we get into it, just to explain what the Climate Alarm podcast is, we're an Irish climate news podcast that came about from a realization a few years ago that people who want to find climate news have to go and seek it out online, and it takes a kind of certain sadistic kind of person to go and seek out the terrible climate news. So we thought if we could have a podcast, a kind of one-stop shop for climate news that people could come and listen to, then that would save some people from doom scrolling. And over time it's evolved to the point where now it's just three of us getting on a Zoom call or a Teams call and having a rant about the latest climate story and the lack of action and our feelings about it. And I suppose we get a lot out of it, and I know that people who listen to it involved in the climate space get a bit out of that as well. So really lovely to be doing a live episode here with Ciara Daly and Tom Spencer, and my name is Darragh. And before we get into our first news story, I suppose we're just going to talk about what do we call this thing? What do we call this crisis or this situation that we're finding ourselves in the world at the moment? This was something we used to do with guests just to get sort of different perspectives. So I might jump over to Tom first if you want to introduce yourself and then talk about what do you call this polycrisis?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a sea of about 16,000 people at the moment.
Ciara, stop crowd surfing.
So I'm Tom Spencer. I joined the lads a couple of years back. For me, it's the climate emergency. I think it's important that we have a word in there that shows that it's an urgent crisis. And crisis, like, I think we normalized that during the pandemic, and like this isn't a normal thing. And I think also when we start talking about it as like a planetary crisis, a planetary emergency, it can feel too big. It puts people off. Like, how can you change something happening on the far side of the world? So for me, yeah, just something as simple as, this is the climate emergency, we have to act now. If you had a medical emergency, you would hopefully get on it pretty quickly and try and stem the bleeding. And that's not what we've done over the last few decades. So that's it for me.
Right, thanks a million, Tom. And Ciara is back from a wild bit of crowd surfing there. Ciara, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what do you call this crisis?
Very personal question. No. So I'm Ciara. I am the emotional member of the podcast group. This is my therapy session. And these people are my psychiatrists and friends and supporters. What do you want me to say? I've totally blanked.
What do you call it? So Tom said he calls it the climate emergency. Some people call it climate change, climate crisis.
I just got distracted by the crowd. So the climate crisis is what I call it because it's just easy, quick and easy for me. I've been thinking about it actually this weekend, and I think I have written in big notes in my notes for today that we have a failure to connect the dots happening in climate communication. And I had to think about it myself, because when I talk about the climate crisis, I'm thinking about everything that is wrong in the world. And I'm just too embarrassed or uncomfortable to articulate that to the people that I'm speaking to. And I just sort of mumble it and hope we can quickly move on from whatever we're talking about. So I'm going to have to reconsider. I'm going to have to do a rebrand of the climate crisis for myself. I'm not sure what I'll go with. Maybe connection crisis like yourself.
Yeah, so that was actually one of our guests, Cara Carney, who runs the Book of Leave podcast. When we asked her this question, she called it the disconnection crisis, because she said it's people being disconnected from each other, it's people being disconnected from the planet, from nature, that's actually at the core of the problem. So I think that's a lovely way of doing it. I don't know what I call it really, but I think it's probably something bigger than the climate for me. It's a consumption crisis. Even if all fossil fuel emissions stopped tomorrow, we would still have a biodiversity crisis. We would still have huge problems for nature in Ireland and around the world, or water quality in our rivers in Ireland would still be not good. So I think for me it's consumption, maybe it's a capitalism crisis, but that it's our relationship with the natural world is totally broken. And for me the climate crisis is a kind of symptom of that rather than being the whole problem. So I think, sometimes we obviously need to deal with the climate crisis, but we need to take a step back sometimes as well. And I think that's why Earth Rising is great, because there's lots of different perspectives and lots of different people, all coming together for this festival. Great.
Okay.
So with that, normally the podcast is a news roundup, so we're going to stick with that format. And the first news story that we're going to go with is that Ireland this summer, just finished a couple of weeks ago, was the hottest ever summer on record. So 2025, hottest summer on record. So you'll often hear people talking about the fabled summers of 1995 and 1976. This summer that we've just had is the hottest summer on record. I think I've heard stuff over the weekend about people saying the climate crisis it's really impacting other places, and it's still something that's distant in Ireland, but we're seeing it. This was the hottest summer we've ever had. 6 of the last 10 hottest summers have been in the last 20 years. So I suppose, that's really noteworthy. And I think the other thing that's noteworthy about it is we've just gotten so used to record-breaking temperatures, record-breaking storms, record-breaking floods, record-breaking droughts, that extremes has become this new normal, and we can get really almost immune to it, that it's not a big deal, but it is such a big deal, like our seasons, our climate that human civilization developed because of is falling apart around us, and that's manifesting in these record-breaking temperatures.
The summer this year, it's nearly a 2-degree average increase. Is that right?
Yep. Yep.
So, in terms of, I'm going to make the assumption that that all the hundreds of thousands that people are here today understand. But just in terms of like literally connecting those dots, as we were saying that the media are failing to do, why does it actually matter that the summer is getting hotter?
It always comes back to those same things. So like the first thing we can think of is like food impact. So for like last year, the number of potatoes harvested was down by 2 tons per acre. We had like a 10% drop the year before that in like potatoes being harvested. We relied on, I'm trying to find the line here, yeah. We import four of every 5 calories that we consume in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're seeing that there's collapse across Europe already, so the other places we rely on to grow our food, that's already collapsing. We're seeing hospital admissions are rising rapidly. So there was an 8.5% increase on hotter days for hospital referrals related to like heat stroke and that sort of thing. I mean, there's still the like health implications that we're not talking about, which is like the mental health impact of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But effectively, society is starting to fall apart around us bit by bit. And this is an incremental like situation that we're seeing. The irony is this is likely the coolest summer that we'll have for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Tom, that like there is no new normal. You know, that's a phrase that we often hear, the new normal. There is no new normal. The new normal is constant change and a constant increasing in extremity. And I think the other way to look at that is we've had our hottest summer ever, and we consider ourselves so lucky when we look at what Europe was like this summer with temperatures over 40 degrees, wildfires in places. And yeah, I think just to take a step back and realize how insane this change is, and to try to, obviously we have to accept it, but try to step back and realize this is so wrong. And I suppose, Ciara, to your question about what does that mean, what does that look like, it's not necessarily this summer in isolation. You know, I think it was actually a lovely summer, and there was nice bits of rain in between the hot weather, so droughts and stuff weren't too bad. But it's that every year, with every passing year, the risk is getting greater. The risk is getting greater, as Tom was saying, that we're going to see impacts on food production, or that we're going to see a drought, or that we're going to see, like when we had Storm Eowyn, where it was, you know, electricity affecting society functioning in parts of the country for a week. As the climate changes, as the temperatures increase, the risks of catastrophic, dangerous things happening increases.
And for context, like right now we're at about 1.3, 1.4 degrees C of warming. Might be as high as 1.5, but you have to look over longer term averages. We're heading for 3.8 degrees. Like if this is how much things are already starting to fail at 1.3, 1.4, like double or exponentially grow every crisis that we're already seeing. You mentioned the wildfires. So here in Ireland by July, we'd lost 4,300 hectares from fire, just here in Ireland. But across Europe, that was 440,000. That's double the average we've seen since 2006. Like every summer we're seeing is getting worse. And Darragh and I actually spoke over the summer because we're starting to have this like response to it. You might be aware of this idea of like solastalgia, like the emotion you get from feeling the seasons changing and it not being natural. Like the summers have become this fear of constant fires and like news stories about every breakdown that we're seeing. We get the short respite for like 2 or 3 months in the autumn, and then the winter storms come. And if you think back to the last winter that we had, like how many houses lost power, how many people ended up in hospital because of these situations, and like there wasn't government support for it. So we're still not acting to undermine the climate emergency, to act on it, and we're not even putting the things in place to protect people when we have those effects from it. So it really does, you know, I don't want to dampen, everyone likes putting on a pair of shorts and enjoying the sun.
Dampen it. One of the discussions we've had around, because this is complicated in that we're doing a live show, but our show is essentially the news. It's not fun, it's not sexy, it's not creative.
Speak for yourself.
And even when I'm listening to you guys, the 3.8, 4.5, 6 hectares, I don't know, it's a lot of maths.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, we're like apologizing, but I suppose that's the point of why we're here today, is that, and that whole thing around the communication around it is how a huge part of why I'm involved in this podcast is because it all seems so abstract. Climate change, we think of rising sea levels, glaciers melting, I don't know, whatever. What else? It's part of climate change. And all of those things seem so far away. But actually, we're a news podcast, and the facts are what you're saying, like it's a bit of a buzzkill, but it's what we need to deliver.
Yeah.
When I was looking into it, like, what are the reports that are around the hot summer? The hottest day is recorded in Roscommon, and it's 31 degrees. There's no story about the fact that this is shit scary. It's like sun worshippers went to the park. I was like, for God's sake, no connection to climate change. We three, who are not journalists, I sat down like a freak on Thursday afternoon, and I Googled to make the connection myself. Heat illnesses, the ESRI found that emergency hospital admissions were 8.5% higher on the days where when the days were hotter. So that's impacting our hospitals. That's obviously putting pressure on our already maxed out budgets that are not being used efficiently. Water scarcity issues. So in Meath, they had to have a hosepipe ban. It doesn't end until Tuesday. And to me, a hosepipe ban means they can't they can't water their grass, but they actually can't look after their vegetable patches, for instance. So it's it sounds like such a not important thing, but it actually is very impactful. Then in Meath, they also have the water level in their lake, which supplies the River Boyne, which is under immense, it's nearly going to end up like that Loch Ness thing. Is that right to say? So their water is their water levels are really low. So that's a problem. That's kind of they're kind of both working connected. Connect the dots. You're watching me realize in real life what I've written down. And as you said, the farmers, so we know that we've got the production, but also you talk about the mental health, and that's something we talk about on the podcast all of the time, the pressure and strain and the emotional strain on them, but also the financial strain. So just all of that, I just get so pissed off, as you can probably tell, that connection is not being made. It's not fun and it's not sexy, and we shouldn't be here apologizing because we...
But it's also been a theme here at IMMA. If you look at there's a great home tree exhibit here, and they've been going out with farmers and talking to farmers about their lived experience on the land and how they're feeling about climate change. We already have farmers who are living in tough conditions. They can barely make money, make ends meet. They're doing what they can with their land. And for me, I think this ties in with what we're seeing with the situation in Palestine at the moment. One of the questions some people still ask is why do people cling on? Why don't you leave? We're doing that here in Ireland right now. We're already seeing the effects of climate change kicking in, but people want to hang on. We have a relationship with place. We love this tree. We love this farm. We love this plot of land. And one of the things that we're all guilty of is because we're talking about temperatures increasing, we think it's going to get hotter. But one of the things we don't talk about here in Ireland is the AMOC. So this Atlantic current that is on the verge of collapse. We're constantly getting news updates saying this is going to collapse in the coming decades. And the upshot of that is we're going to have winters that would be similar to Norway or similar to sort of Canada. So our crops aren't going to survive that sort of thing, and we're not prepared. We all know when there's a snow day here, everyone panics and we have to get the huskies out and sort of start gritting the roads.
Speaking of the roads, one of the things I put in, and I actually said maybe this is a bit of a stretch, but if this is the sort of thing that should be on the news, that the roads were melting because it's too hot. And if you can make it AMOC, how many years? I still don't know what that is. And I don't care. But I care that I can't get up the road because it's too hot. And I care that the council, who I'm having a fight with in my village because they won't build speed bumps, now have to go out and retar a road, that kind of thing. If we could not have us three feckin' Egypts up here and have RTE read out the roads are melting because of climate change, people will... Yeah. It will all be solved.
I think that's the big point, though. We were laughing because our badges here say media, and we're not media.
You were laughing. I was crying. I literally cried.
We're not media. We started a podcast because the climate reporting in the news is so bad. That's where the podcast came from. And I think that is the thing, is that we need that regularity. We need that constant conversation so that people can see, climate change it's not just rising sea levels, and it's not just storms. It's our food systems, it's our health, It is our well-being, it's our community, it's everything, and it's constantly talking about that and getting the different angles. That's how the message lands. It's not through, oh, I saw this one podcast, even though if anyone wants to say, oh, I saw this one podcast and now I understand climate change, that would be great. Review us online. But it's that constant conversation is what's needed to
make
join
it
the
feel
dots.
real, because we were talking about what do you call it, the climate, and for me I was saying I say it really fast so I can just get over talking about it, because it's sort of like saying to people like, oh, I really believe in fairies. People will just think you're here at IMMA we all are on the same page, but like lots of people, we're going to talk about it in a while, that people are concerned about climate change, but they're afraid to say it. Like, we are doing this podcast for so long, and I'm still afraid because someone's going to think I'm some Lutheraman. And it's that thing, if you can put it into like things visible, things that we see in front of us, and see things that we're affected by in our daily lives, it gets easier. It's like COVID. We all were so waiting around who's going to put on our mask, and then we all started wearing the masks, and we all just did it. We all accepted we have to wear masks now.
Yeah, so I think maybe that's a good point to go on to our second story, I suppose, just before we move on from maybe the hottest summer in Ireland ever, just to maybe reflect a bit of what we've seen at IMMA. Darragh did an amazing event here yesterday talking about the global climate impacts, where a couple of years ago a third of Pakistan was underwater from flooding at a given time, and people in sort of East Africa suffering from terrible drought, that, the climate crisis can still be something that's abstract for us here in the global north, even though we're seeing it around us, but it is devastating livelihoods, communities around the world at the moment, and us in the global north that we're
I want
responsible.
you to stop saying it's abstract, because it's not. The roads are melting, Darragh.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So I suppose our second story then, we might let you lead out on this one, Tom. This is about public perception when it comes to climate change.
Yeah, public perception and also like political response. There's been a few surveys and studies recently I thought we'd put together because I think they're quite interesting. So first is a study from the University of Oxford. They went to the UN Environmental Assembly and asked delegates, politicians there, what their estimate was in terms of how much of the world's population would be willing to give 1% of their income in order to fix the climate emergency. So the politicians responded and say, 37% of people would be willing to give 1% of their income. The actual answer is 69% of people.
Yeah.
Most people are really worried about this and want to see action. And that was backed up because 89% of respondents said that their national government should be doing more to fight climate change. And this comes just a couple of weeks after the Tony Blair Institute put out a report saying that emissions reduction policies are unpopular, they're unfair, there's a lack of public support. So this report talks about this idea of like a political misconception gap. And one stat that I thought was really interesting from it, 83...
Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you.
Yeah, go for it.
What is the Tony Blair Institute?
So Tony Blair, post being the Prime Minister of the UK, went and set up his own consultancy, has typically worked with people in the Middle East, often oil companies and that sort of thing, to sell ideas that seem politically sound, which is actually something we'll talk about, but often have a particular focus or bent.
Okay.
But
back to your numbers, though.
Yeah. Too many stats, I know, but this one I thought was really interesting. 83% of the politicians surveyed said that they agree that individual members of the public have the ability to take meaningful climate action. So again, it's putting the onus on you and I to take action rather than those that we vote into power. And there was a second study that I thought we should talk about too, which is talking about the language around climate action. So this is from the University of Bath. And they talked about politicians constantly use words like pragmatic, common sense solutions. It's designed to sound reassuring. It's supposed to sort of put us at ease. And then they use words for climate campaigners that are hysterical, extreme, unrealistic. So the University of Bath talks about this as the new language, the new discourse of delay. This isn't pragmatic. This is a deliberate act to slow action, to like take us away from it. So when we put these two things together, if you're worried about the climate emergency, you're not alone. Most of us in the world are. It's the politicians who aren't. So what we have to do is actually come together. The more we have events like this where there's unity and community, the more likely we are to make them actually do something about it.
Yeah, it's something that I find really, really hopeful is that, like so many people, if you're worried about climate change, so many people think you're in the minority, but you're not. You're in the majority. Most people do care about it, and there's, really, I'm sure, complicated psychological and sociological things going on with social norms that people feel like they can't talk about it or don't want to talk about it. But actually, like 69% of people will be willing to give 1% of their wages for climate action. And that stat is repeated over and over again. So like I find it personally very reassuring that, sometimes you can feel on your own when it comes to this climate stuff. And that's one reason why this festival in IMMA is great, because it's bringing people together. But actually, most people care. And maybe they don't have the understanding because it's complicated, or maybe they don't feel like they can take action, but there is that willingness to change and see change.
I think there's a really interesting parallel. If you look in the UK, particularly, John Barry is here today in a beautiful Palestine Action t-shirt. He's waving at us now. There's in the UK, there has been this collective action. People have got on the streets and said, we care about genocide, we don't want our government to be complicit. We haven't seen that outpouring in the same way for climate action just yet. But what I thought was really interesting, in the last week, Banksy went to the courts of justice in the UK and put this image of a magistrate beating a Palestine Action protester who is calling for the government not to be complicit in a genocide. I don't think we can reiterate that enough. When Just Stop Oil went into museums and took great care not to damage art, but to use art, if we are going to lose this art, if we lose the planet. And yet in the last week, the government removed, erased, destroyed Banksy's artwork. We have climate activists who are in prison because they didn't damage artworks, but used artworks to protest a cause. But the government didn't care. None of the government will go to prison for removing this public work of art. So there's this complete double standard. They are totally taking no action, wasting decade after decade, and yet we get in trouble when we protest, which is again reiterating we need more of us, we need that collective action, because Palestine Action has showed there is this strong passion and people will come out and put the pressure on the government.
I think the other thing for me with that fact that everyone, most people want to see climate action, most people are concerned, and sometimes it's trying to get that way of engaging people or connecting with people. And for me, one of the things I always say is sometimes it's not what people need to hear, it's who they need to hear it from.
Yeah.
So I think like us up here on the stage, like you might listen or you might not, but if your relative speaks to you, or if a colleague or a friend speaks to you, even if the detail isn't, even if it's not perfectly scientifically accurate, the fact that it's coming from a peer or someone you care about, that makes such a big difference. That's so important. And that one of the stories I come back to semi-regularly on that is nearly 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I was in college and I went to a friend's house for the first time, back to like his parents' house, and his mother said, oh, we eat vegetarian food here, we just eat meat twice a week for environmental reasons. We don't eat meat to save the planet because cows are very bad for the planet. And I'm from a farming background, and this was 2009 maybe, and I remember thinking, this woman is absolutely insane. What is she on about? Like that meat is bad for the planet. But I suppose, and now we all know that and we all understand that, but that definitely percolated in my mind because it was a friend, one of my best friends, it was his family, someone I really respected, and they had taken this action. And that, when I look back at when did I start to become interested in climate change, it was that was a really formative thing, which I didn't realize at the time, and the people who did it didn't realize, and it took a few years to get there and for that impact to happen. But absolutely, it was just my friend and his family showing they cared, showing they were interested in a totally non-judgmental way, and that has, led to me now working, in this field and, trying to take action.
All from one vegetarian curry.
All from one vegetarian curry. Exactly. Yeah.
You were talking about how, like, politicians, what's the language? That they talk about being pragmatic, and that's a word I won't swear, hate. Because I am a very emotional person. And one of the things about this weekend is yesterday we were kind of going around, and when we left to go back to our hotel, I kind of said something, I just don't really, maybe I shouldn't say this in the reception of IMMA, but we're going to say it. I was like, I don't really get it. Like, what's the point? Like, we just looked at a load of stuff. We're at a climate festival, and when I went back to the hotel, I had to have a think about it. And I said, okay, there's a couple of things going on here. My usual thing of going to a festival is I want to go to electric picnic. I want to go and eat great food. I want to go see music. I just want to enjoy myself. And I'm not considering all of this stuff that's wrong with society. I might go to a talk or two, but I'm not going to, be like looking at an existential crisis for the whole weekend. And I thought about that when we came home, and was just thinking, I was like, I'm actually having a panic attack of, like, a very dulled down panic attack of like, what's going on? And I'm feeling like, why are we like wasting time looking at art when we should be doing all of this other stuff? And it was so unsettling, and I just had to go with it. And actually, even this morning, we were listening to Katie O'Connor doing that absolutely amazing music in the chapel. And I just got so upset thinking she was talking about Palestine, and I had read the news this morning. And I was like, no, I'm just going to let myself get upset. But then you came over, and I was like, no, I'm fine. Do not acknowledge that I am upset. And I did that thing where I was like, no, let me just gather myself for like a public appearance, like turn up in society. But actually, it's so uncomfortable. And we can't obviously just all go around and start crying. But if we could bin pragmatism, like I would love for people to actually just get rid of pragmatism and freak out and cry and laugh. The amount of laughing we do when we have this constant thing when we do this podcast. We have a bit where we might cry or get really angry, and then we laugh, and it's this constant cycle.
Yeah, and I think there's a lovely, because it is, it's brilliant. It's brilliant that people are coming to spend their weekend to, explore climate change and the environmental crisis, and it does take, sorry now to be insulting the whole crowd that are here, but it does take a certain kind of person to give up your weekend to come and look at this existential crisis that we're all facing. So fair play to everyone that's come out here.
No, I am going to fight you on that.
But what I'm getting to is there's
for the recording, they can't see this. He just put his hand in my face and said, "No, woman."
There's a psychologist called Caroline Hickman who does a lot of stuff around climate anxiety, and she talks about that a lot. That we can find this stuff very confronting and very upsetting, and often when we have those feelings that you were talking about, we want to turn away rather than embrace those difficult feelings. And the way that she says is, if you're feeling these things, if you're seeing this stuff and being upset about it, or if you're, worried about these things, or if you're angry about the genocide in Palestine, she's like, be proud that you care.
Yeah.
It's a positive thing. It's a really positive thing that we care, and our society sometimes doesn't acknowledge that or doesn't engage with that. But the people here, at Earth Rising, they're the people that care. People here in the audience, you're the people that care. So don't run away from that. Be proud that you care. And I think that's a lovely sentiment.
Have that, just with that study that said 89% of people think their government should do more. So and we know, 2/3 of people are worried about climate change?
Yeah.
So even if someone is not going to IMMA, even if someone is not a vegetarian, even if someone has a feckin' SUV, don't assume, allow for someone to be weird and incorrect in their display of their concern, because I think there is a tendency in the art space to be a little bit, you don't really belong here. You have to, there is.
No, I know what you're saying. Like, even from an economics perspective, there might be people who are working class who can't afford to take some of the actions. Like, it becomes this division. If you don't have the time to go and do something, that's a really tough position to be in.
I think it's just that thing, like, just connect,
Yeah.
just connect, man.
Yeah, and
Love,
I think this
peace
weekend,
and love.
yeah, and I think it has been great here for, seeing lots of people come together
Yeah.
and being in a space where people do care. I suppose what you were saying there, Ciara, about people caring and wanting to see action. Maybe our last thing to kind
Yes,
of
action.
wrap up is we've been going around asking people at IMMA if you could see one change, one big action happening in society. What action would you like to see? So we might come across the line again. Maybe, Tom, if you could pick sort of one thing that you'd like to see change, one big action, what would it be?
I would encourage everyone who's here at IMMA today to go and ask the government why they're still not being honest with all of us about how bad things are likely to get, how quickly they're likely to get that bad, and why they're still completely off target for the emissions in 2030.
Yeah.
Like, we're just heading towards this crisis and doing nothing about it. And I think what we've seen from these studies is collective action is the most likely way for us all to get there, and we can support one another. So I would encourage everyone to go and put those difficult questions to the people in charge.
Brilliant. And just on that, the event yesterday, the Troker were running, they have a campaign at the moment linked, I think, to Not Here, Not Anywhere, where they are sending postcards to the Minister for Climate, Darragh O'Brien, asking for no new fossil fuel infrastructure and to end Shannon
forgot
LNG.
he was the minister.
So do get involved with that Troker campaign. It's a really, really fantastic campaign and one step along to what you were saying. So thanks for that, Tom. Ciara, one change, what would you like to see?
The media, I'm perplexed as to why we three Egypts are sitting up here. When I got my media pass yesterday, I nearly passed out. I don't want to have to read all these stories and put two and two together myself. I just want to have it done for me and made normalized, even though it shouldn't be normalized, but you know what I mean, brought into everyday conversation. So, I don't know, email the Irish Times.
Yeah, and support the really good journalists. We're not journalists, but support the good work that is out there happening in this space. For me, the one change is related to food. There's a brilliant project out there, the brilliant Ballybunion, that they're doing stuff around growing beans and trying to grow food locally. There's an amazing organisation called Talamh Bio who try to do stuff with local food to help producers produce food for their local communities and have local people eating nutritious local food. And I think coming full circle to where we were talking about disconnection, we're so disconnected from our food. For me, food is a really big in for that connection, understanding where our food comes from, tuning in with the cycles of nature, eating seasonally. That is a big in. Obviously, we need to dismantle the fossil fuel industry, and that's who has caused the problem primarily. But for me, engaging with food is a really good way of getting in. And with that, I think we're heading towards
That's our time.
wrapping up.
Yeah.
I think we're not just heading towards wrapping up, I think we've solved the climate crisis. Well done to all involved.
So for anyone who has arrived kind of late, we are from the Climate Alarm Clock podcast. So we're an Irish climate news podcast. We've been around for a few years and our format has changed. As we've gone on, we're going to be releasing monthly news episodes this year and monthly other episodes. So we'll have this episode
We're
going
going
out.
To make it up as we go
And
along.
we'll have one, for example, about this Earth Rising Festival coming out. I'm Darragh Wynne, and this is Ciara Daly and Tom Spencer. And
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you.
Coming out.
Encore! Oh, again. All right, thanks, guys.